if you look after the mental health, then you're also going to improve the physical health. Like, they come together and it gets into a wonderful feedback loop. So, I think gone are the days where we used to see them as separate entities. Like, everyone's a whole person. Hello and welcome back to Becca Boots. I'm your host, Becca Boots, and today is the 10th part of my 10-part series where I bring on people in my network to share with us their nuggets of gold. Now, as it is the final episode of my first series, I am going to shake things up a little bit. I've decided to change the position and be the interviewee. So I have with me today Mel Cunningham, who is a friend of mine. We know each other through Toastmasters and we have a shared interest in mental health. She was on my podcast a few months ago, and she is going to interview me to find out what I am thinking about health and well-being, and hopefully I will have some nuggets of gold to share with you. So let me bring on Mel. I have no idea how this is going to go. Wish me luck, and let's get going. Mel, it's so good to have you here to interview me. I'm a little bit scared.
So you should be.
Would you like to introduce yourself so people know why you're here with me?
Right. So good morning, everybody, whenever you're listening to this. So I'm Mel Cunningham, and Rebecca and I have known each other for, I think, nearly 3 years now. I think it's 3 years.
Yeah.
But I knew of her for a very long time before I actually met her. So her reputation preceded her. And I was told of this gigantic woman who had loads of enthusiasm, loads of thoughts, and lots to say for herself. So I'm privileged to be the one who gets to interview her. Right. Rebecca and I also are heavily involved in Toastmasters, which is how we do lots of stuff together. We're both presidents this year, which we're both pretty proud of. And for us, it's really crucial that people are encouraged and enabled and empowered to speak up about their experiences. So I've got quite a few questions for Becca this morning. So first of all, I'm going to ask Becca to introduce herself briefly, and then we'll move on. Over to you.
Okay, so for those who don't know me, because you may have never seen my podcast before, you might have not followed me, a little intro to who I am. So I am the founder of Siendo, and everything Siendo does is all around mental health and well-being. So looking after your well-being day to day to support your mental health for longer term. So the kind of things I do include things like development coaching. Love coaching. I'm a yoga teacher now as well, which is fantastic. I also train people as mental health first aiders in work, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit more later. And also I'm studying as well to be a meditation and mindfulness teacher, just to add that into the mix. Why not? So yeah, everything I do is on the preventative side, to kind of look after yourself, get aware, get knowledgeable around your mental health and well-being, and putting in practices day to day within personal lives as well as like within businesses, making it so that people can look after their mental health longer term. That's me.
Great. Okay. Well, so Siendo is Rebecca's business, but you have started this literally the week that the pandemic started in this country. She'd been planning for a very, very long time. But the question is, now that we're 6 months down the line, do you see the pandemic as an opportunity or a threat for your business?
Oh, okay. At the beginning, so for those who don't know, before this I worked in banking and business for a very long time, and I worked really hard to build my business up to a really good place alongside work so that I could go out on my own, which I did. Like Mel said, I launched my business full time. I left my job at the end of February, launched my business, went on holiday happily, just carried on doing my thing. and came back from holiday and straight into lockdown. So it was a bit of a shock, to say the least. But I've really found that at the beginning, I was a bit shell-shocked by it. Like, I had all these courses booked, had stuff with companies planned. I'd set it up so it was really like a really strong start. And then it was all suddenly ripped away because everyone went into firefighting mode. We couldn't see anyone, we couldn't run any courses. And I remember just feeling like, oh my God, like what does that mean? Like, because you, at the time, you think, don't you, like, is it how long this is going to be for? Like, we had no idea of timescales. And so I think at the time I was a bit like a rabbit in headlights. Like, obviously, I think it's a massive opportunity for people, for businesses and people now, to take care of their mental health, because it's a time where, like, we're so much uncertainty, we're a lot of us are scared, a lot of us feel unsure, a lot of us feel like, you know, some people, like, so many redundancies, things like that. There's so much going on that looking after our mental health is huge at the moment. It's just, the difficulty is when crisis happens or when austerity happens, you have businesses tend to cut learning and development. So they cut L&D because that's not a priority. They obviously needed to focus on the, you know, the business functions that bring in money. And then they cut things, so cut things like coaching are cut, things like you know, any excess in external training is cut. So times like this, everyone then is just operating from a state of fear. And I think that is a really difficult place to operate from. If the support is taken away because they, like, businesses or people deem that it's a luxury rather than a necessity, then they'll stay in this state of fear and insecurity. And when they're in that state, they can't produce properly. People can't. They're constantly in that kind of fight flight state.
So I'm going to interrupt really briefly.
Yeah, go for it.
And just say two things. One, in Toastmasters, we do something called impromptu speaking. And before we started, Becca and I actually just did one to get us into flow, right? One of the things that we were always taught is that if you start off by getting up and you act out of fear, you will freeze. And nothing will come. Nothing will come. You'll just stand there saying nothing. And I think this is exactly how a lot of businesses are right now. They're looking at a really threatening situation, and all of their staff are in the same mode because they don't know what to do. They don't know what to respond to. And it's almost that advice we're given. Just go with relaxing and just go with whatever first comes to your brain. Don't worry about it because it'll just be whatever the right thing is. The other thing is, I wonder whether it's about time we start not convincing, but imploring businesses to see that training like this isn't a luxury. It's not a luxury if your staff aren't able to function. That actually is hugely detrimental to your business. You think of anybody who breaks their leg. If they can't function, they can't do their job, then you're actually losing out in all ways in a business. So maybe that's something needs to be in the way that you approach businesses. It's not about it being a luxury investment. It's an investment in your staff, an investment in your business in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've perfectly stole my point. That's where I was going. That it isn't a luxury. And that's where people operate from, don't they? They operate from a place of fear. So they cut out things that they believe are luxury, not necessarily what is luxury. And so where people do cut out things like coaching and wellbeing stuff and mental health first aid, they actually need to turn towards it and think, right, okay, how can we get our staff back into a place where they feel they're able to produce effectively, that they can feel confident, that they can feel like they've got, you know, as much as possible, that they've got their head straight, ready to kind of tackle all these challenges that are going to come. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's a difficult thing because even though a lot of our understanding around mental health has grown a lot over the past 5 to 10 years, it's still not got like parity of esteem with physical health, like you said, like with a broken leg. So we do need to look at helping change that within businesses and building our strategy around it for sure.
Mm. Okay, so I'm going to move on to, you briefly touched on the fact that you started your business whilst you were in banking.
Yeah.
But what made you decide to move into mental health? Like, that's quite a drastic change.
Is it though, if you think about it? Banking, mental health.
Well, and in actual fact, I am hoping that at some point you will combine both of them, because the banking industry has gone through a lot of knocks. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but they have had a lot of knocks since 2008. And I think a lot of us forget that, you know, they're not just corporations, they're people that pick up the phone. And when you talk to them about bank loans or whatever, they are people just like we are. And they are in the same situation. We're all in the same situation. So what was it about banking, or was it something else that made you think, I really need to be part of mental health?
It's a nice question. Picking up on what you said previously first before going to that about how people within banking are people, I completely agree. And there's obviously there's so much bad press around banking. We forget that, yeah, there are some bad eggs within banking, just like there are within every organization. But people in banking that you speak to on the phone, speak to wherever, they are just people. And, you know, they've not always been clear as, the clearest and honest most people all the time. But at the end of the day, if we're focusing on the fact that there's an issue within banking, we have to remember that the people need the support. Because when I used to tell people I'd work in banking, I was actually feeling so much shame every time I said it. Or when I'd say it, people would go, oh. And that kind of constant social rejection is actually really damaging for your mental health as well. So I think we need to remember, yes, banking as its kind of structure and strategy maybe needs to be a bit more customer friendly, but the people as well, it's not all the people, it's just some of the people that are driving it forward in that way.
And some of the loveliest people that I've had the privilege to work with, you know, coming up with their own business, have come from banking.
Yeah,
that they really are, because they are genuinely interested in helping people. And I think this is a side of banking that often gets forgotten. But I also think you're quite right in terms of mentally dealing with someone going, oh, you've got a weird job. Like, that's not very nice. I deal with this sometimes as a photographer. The first reaction is, oh my God, please don't photograph me. I hate being photographed. And it's a similar kind of thing. I spend my life convincing people it's okay to be in front of the camera. And it's similar to banking. It's like, it's okay to have this conversation. We'll just deal with it logically. Okay, so you still didn't answer the question.
Yeah,
what was it about mental health?
Yeah, so, gosh, my mental health journey didn't really start on mental health. So I was working in banking and I started doing some coaching. And so I started training as a coach. So I went down that route, and I found then when I started coaching, a lot of people were coming to me with anxiety, depression. Like the people I was talking to, it was all around stress. It was all around anxiety. It was all around this. And I felt that looking at coaching goals and how you can improve like your how you approach goals wasn't necessarily get into it, because people weren't achieving their goals because they had all this underlying stress and anxiety that weren't dealt with. So that's where I kind of branched out on myself a little bit and started digging into the world of mental health, thinking, right, how can I resolve these underlying issues so then they can actually focus on what they want to focus on in coaching? Because until they've dealt with that, they can't focus on what they want to achieve. And then that kind of took me down a little black hole and of like the mental health. And I just literally got sucked in. I fell in love with it. I find it really, really fascinating. And then I remember I started thinking, I don't know how to deal with mental health in a professional sense. I didn't know how to have the same conversations. I didn't know how to approach it. Like, I just felt like I needed more hands-on experience. Then I started moonlighting as a mental health support worker. And so I I'll be in the banking world Monday to Friday, and then on the weekend do some mental health support shifts. And with like severely schizophrenic people, severe depression, severe self-neglect, like I saw that, like the whole wealth of it. And that's what made me want to change my direction properly, because I would be in the mental health ward at the weekend, and it was so scary, like the states I saw people in, and the lack of support that was available, just because all the services are so stretched. And then I'd go back to the day-to-day job, and it would all feel just wrong. Like I'd be focusing on projects, and I'd be like, this doesn't mean anything to me. Like my weekend work means something to me. And so kind of that's where I kind of grew my business out of that, because I thought, if we can look after our mental health but earlier on in the day, we'll be able to stop it before it gets to the point of the people that I'm looking after on the weekend. Like when I read case files, I saw so many issues that weren't dealt with, like whether it was like family issues where there was abuse, all the stuff, school, anything, like all along the way, they were just not, it wasn't handled, like it wasn't dealt with, they weren't supported until they got to a point where they couldn't look after themselves anymore. So that's where I kind of want to inform people earlier, get people to be able to identify the signs and symptoms, get people to kind of build in these protective factors in their life to look after their mental health and well-being, so that it doesn't get to that point. If that makes sense. So it was probably fear of being like, it can't be like this. Society can't be like this, and we're going that way. And so I kind of branched out, and it was born.
So
yeah.
What's interesting is that one of the words you've used a lot in describing what you do and what's motivated you is supporting people and early identification. And I think this is the same for so many things, in that when you look back, you can go, well, that's what triggered it. That's what tipped it over the balance of being able to cope. And there is something almost tangible but intangible about seeing how someone is sort of coping with what they've got, like situations like abuse or being bullied or dealing with a situation at home, and yet no one steps in. And it's almost like there needs to be a flagging system of some sort. So it just occurred to me that you can look at all the case files, but unless someone stepped in right at the beginning and said, there is support here, there is help, this is what you do.
It's a difficult one. It's quite a complicated structure. Like there is this network of people. Say, for example, let's look at child abuse, right? There is, if there was a child being abused at home, someone would have to notice at the time, or someone would have to report it, which a lot of people don't do, because either they don't notice it or they don't want to get involved. And then once it did get reported, because some of these things are reported afterwards when they're hitting the services at a later date, if it gets reported at the time, then you need to get the services in, and they've got to assess whether it's a good idea to take the child out of the home or not, like how disruptive it will be in terms of going into the system rather than at home. And there's so much to that then as well, because then they've got to prove things, and then you've also got so many different services involved, like safeguarding. So safeguarding children, safeguarding adults, like this whole system came in around making sure the services connected, because huge problems where, like I don't know if you remember Baby Pete, things like that, where people, they'd hit the services at different points but they hadn't communicated. So because all these different services haven't communicated, they fell through the cracks. And so you need, like, they have developed a better strategy and system around it, but you need people to step forward and say, this is wrong, I'm going to report this to NSPCC, for example. Then you need to make sure you can kind of get that support. But when people go into the system and get removed from the home, that's not sometimes better, because then the system is not set up enough to support them. So they'll be a care leaver at, say, 18, or I think it's 18, not 21. They'll leave care, and then they'll have no family structure around them. And so a lot of care leavers end up moving to and like on the streets or working on sex workers, because they haven't got that support there. So it's so intricate, like actually the amount of like different steps that need to be improved and kind of spotted at as you go along, if you know what I mean. It gets really difficult to manage. So it's not a simple solution. Like on the last podcast I was talking to John Sutherland, who was ex-police officer, and he was saying about like you need to trace, there's so much knife crime around, but people just say, right, we need more police reforms, but they don't look, which are like short-term measures, we need quick fixes, but they don't look at the why behind the why. So what caused like the people to go and seek out a gang? What caused people to go and pick up a knife to use that to sort out a problem? Like you trace your way back all to the school system and then the home. It is so complicated. It is so complicated, which is why so many people fall through the cracks. But the more communication we can have between support systems, the better.
At the end of the day, you could also see it as a very simple thing. Every child is important. Their development needs to be supported and encouraged. And I think I'm not a parent, so I don't have this concern, but I can also see that so much of this also comes down to the parents themselves and how they were supported and how they were brought up and what schooling they had and what education that they then instill into their children. And it's not wrong or right, but it's whether the family unit has almost enough glue to stick together. And I think there's something in that cohesion that gets lost for some reason or another. And yeah, you're right, every case is completely different. You don't know what can cause those upsets at all.
No. But it massively, like you said, it's an intergenerational thing. It passes through the generations, and until the parents have support, and they need to have support, like no one teaches anyone how to be a parent anyway, so it's always difficult. Everyone's trying to find their way. But if you haven't developed yourself as a human, as a person, and then you bring more life into the world, then you're going to cause like rifts potentially if you don't know how to look after yourself, never mind if you don't know how to look after someone else, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And one of the things that I know that a lot of my friends struggle with young children is struggling with that idea of, are they doing the right thing? Are they parenting right? Are they allowing the kids to be themselves? Are they allowing for their mental development in a productive way, as opposed to a corrosive way, which eventually will end up in a system as opposed to being supported. So yeah.
I'd say on that, the best thing you can do for your children is to work on yourself.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But it's difficult when you've got a screaming child next to you.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm talking from a place of the fact I've got no children. But one of the things that really motivates me is that I want to be in such an emotionally strong place by the time I have children that I will be able to manage it to my best of my capabilities. Like there's no judgment for any parents, that people always do their best. It's like I can't imagine how incredibly hard it is with no sleep. But I kind of want to, that's where I keep driving myself forward, thinking if I can develop myself as much as possible, then I can get myself to a place where I'm as emotionally stable as possible, so that when a screaming child comes into my life, I don't buckle as easy, which I'm sure I will buckle and hide in the closet. But I have more inner resources than to deal with it, if that makes sense.
Do you know, I think the other side of that though is not just the inner resources, but it's knowing who to reach out to when you are struggling. So 3 of my best friends have had babies in lockdown, and the first thing I said, realizing this was going to be the situation and that I might not be able to go and help as I would have done in the past, I said, you have to tell me if things are not going right and you're really struggling and you're finding it hard, whatever it is, you just need to speak out, because it's reaching out as well, which is just as important as relying on yourself. Because as you say, unless you have a pre-warning, you don't quite know what you're dealing with. So that is an interesting whole other conversation.
That's a
Whole
whole
other conversation. Babies in lockdown. Let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
So it's about turning personal tragedy into triumph. So it kind of links into what we've just been talking about.
Mm.
Viktor Frankl, I know, is one of your favourite authors. So one of your favourite quotes from him is, do you want me to read it out? Human potential at its very best is to transform a tragedy into a personal triumph, to turn one predicament into a human achievement. Do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Oh, I love Viktor Frankl. So he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And for those who don't know him, so he was in the concentration camps, and his whole family, everything, his wife was pregnant and took to the concentration camp. Like his whole family were taken there, and he lost his wife, he lost his parents, and he had a manuscript when he arrived that they just destroyed of his work. So he was like a psychotherapist, so he created this whole manuscript that he was ready to publish, and they destroyed it. He completely got broken, like instead of, they tried to break him as much as possible, and he had the worst things happen to him. He spent about 3 years in concentration camps, and one of the things he found is that if you have a why, you can overcome anything. And his why was to kind of help use his experience at the concentration camps to help people on the outside. So help them to find their own meaning so that they can overcome absolutely anything. And I really like that because it taps into, have you heard about post-traumatic growth?
No, but that sounds rather intriguing.
Yeah. Yeah. So post-traumatic stress is when you've got something happens, trauma happens to you, and you get a reaction to it. That means you're getting flashbacks, or it affects your life in a way that you can't operate as you were before. Whereas post-traumatic growth is where the same trauma can happen to you, but you transform because of this trauma, and you come out of it completely different. So it changes your philosophy on life. It changes the way you look at life. And suddenly that crisis, that tragedy becomes a strength, and you come out of it. So say, for example, in the pandemic, you might get two people who have very similar experiences. One would come out of it with post-traumatic stress, like really kind of like their mental health severely affected. And then the other person could come out really grown from it, because something's altered, and then they look at things differently. They maybe had friendship groups change, the way they approach the crisis changes, because it just taps into something internal with them that alters their kind of belief of things. And I think that's what I love about, one, Viktor Frankl, and two, what he writes about, because he's like, some of the worst things you can ever imagine happening to you happened to him, and he took from that, he survived it, and like horrendous stuff he survived. Read the book, it's heartbreaking. He survived it and then came out of it to continue his life, develop logotherapy, develop all these different things to help people then find meaning in their life so they can improve their living and their mental health. So like, it's just incredible. Like, it's just an incredible man. I'm a huge fan.
I think it's a book I'll have to read. There is something fascinating about the crucible of someone being locked up for a long amount of time, but also persecuted at the same time for their beliefs and for what they're trying to change and just who they are, and to then be able to come out into a society that accepts them for who they are and encourages what they're trying to change. It's very similar to Mandela, I think. When he went in, he didn't approve of violence, but he said it was useful to use if they needed to. But by the time he came out, he was about reconciliation as opposed to combating it. And I think there's something we can all take away from being in a pandemic right now, in that some of us will come out with some very different attitudes and different behaviors, and almost a whole different ethos for having been locked up. I think because that is what's happening right now. And some of us will not deal with it very well. And I think that's the other side of it. Those who come out changed need to recognize those that have come out and aren't able to adapt or aren't able to cope with what has changed, because it will be very different when this is over, finished, the way we are. Who knows? So I think what's interesting about Frankl is that obviously he came out into a world that then saw the trauma that went on in these concentration camps, but wasn't talked about for a very long time. And all we saw was the violence as opposed to the mental strain that must have caused and been handed down through generations. So definitely,
I recommend it.
if you can turn trauma into triumph, that is something else. Yeah.
The thing is, some people's trauma is not to like undermine the fact that what they've gone through has been horrendous. Like people will have lost people have lost their jobs, people could have lost so much through this. And you know, you may have been lucky compared to like so many people through this pandemic. And so it's not undervaluing the fact that they've gone through one hell of a storm. It's just seeing how we can take it and transform our lives for the better from it.
And I think also acknowledging that everybody comes out of these things differently.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And this sort of leads on quite nicely, because obviously you can't interview Viktor Frankl now.
No.
So your podcast, you've done 12? Is it 13?
Oh, this is my 15th.
Okay, 15.
This is my 10th interview.
Okay, so 15 podcasts. So who would be your dream interviewee?
Who I'd interview? Okay, I reckon Jon Kabat-Zinn.
Okay.
So he is a scientist and a meditation teacher, and he basically was one of the key players that brought meditation and mindfulness to the Western world. And I love him. I'm reading his book at the moment, which is like this big, like Full Catastrophe Living. It's got like 800 odd pages in it. You could literally whack someone over the head with it. It's huge, but there's so much wealth of knowledge in it. Like his experience, he basically took his science background and he merged it with his mindfulness and meditation experiences and used science to show how incredible meditation and mindfulness is for your well-being, and did loads of studies around it to create this mindfulness based like stress reduction program that he created in America. And yeah, God, I'd love to interview him and just pick his brain about everything. He's got so much value to add. Like he's I think he might be retired now almost, but yeah, he's still fantastic brain in mindfulness. Him.
It's fascinating, the phrase, and I don't know if we've picked it up and it's not accurate or what. The bringing meditation to the Western world. It's like, where are we bringing it from?
The Eastern world. I think that things in like, it was like Thailand, you've got like all around Asia, like Korea, Japan, China, you've got India. Their meditation and yoga and mindfulness has been part of their culture for so long. Like it goes so far back, but we haven't got that same history for mindfulness and meditation and that. And so people didn't really do it like they do in Asia. Like they've done it throughout history. And so they brought mindfulness and meditation in and kind of wove it into our culture.
I think actually it needs to have a much stronger base rather than just being brought across. I think there's something in the idea that it's just part of their tradition. And it's almost like we need to create our own tradition around this, because otherwise people still see it as something that's Eastern as opposed to something that we do as humans. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's still marking it as something that is foreign, but it's not.
So I think Yes, I can see that. And yeah, I think the way that people have adapted it, like John Kabat-Zinn, he's created programs, he's like adapted it to kind of fit our world, and but in the Western kind of culture. But I think the fact that it's steeped in so much history within the Eastern world, has got a lot of like kudos behind it. You know, we can see how much it's like been built over the years and how much people have used it, and we can learn from them. So I think yes, we need to embed it so it's just what everyone does no matter where they're from. But also I think it gives it value, that it's something that they've created, and I'm sure it was probably maybe in our history somewhere, but it's something that's so strong in Asia, and there's so much to learn from them, that I think it gives it a lot of value in my eyes.
I think it gives it gravitas. I think it shows that there's a very long demonstration that it works, that it's useful, that it's beneficial. I guess from my perspective, what I find is that people are resistant to it. So there is this added pressure in convincing people that meditation is a good thing for you to do every day, as opposed to how easy it is to convince a child that you have to brush your teeth every day.
I don't know, my nephew's quite hard. But yeah, I can see that. I think people are afraid of things that they don't understand. And if you kind of you've got to do it in order to see how beneficial it is. But yeah, I don't know. I think if it's brought into school, like a lot of places have brought it into schools, the more it's kind of fed into our school culture at a really young age, like in India and places like that, they're taught to meditate like super young, and then by the time they're 13, they are treated like adults in terms for how long you sit for meditation, all the things you do around mindfulness. And it's so embedded from a very young age. If we can do that, then it will bring it into part of our culture, and it won't be something people fear. I think schools is a great place to start, and at home.
Yeah. So I'm going to move on to something talking about your yoga teaching that you've done, your recent yoga training, but also how you're going to meld that with other things like your mindfulness training and your meditation coaching, and how you want to try and meld them together in some way.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, when I talk to people about what I'm training in, they're like, "Is there anything you're not training in?" Like, I'm like, you have no idea. There's so much I haven't trained in yet. I love it all so much. But yes, I've got my yoga teaching and my meditation. I'm also starting my massage diploma in January.
Seriously?
So excited. My sister's already got me booked. She's very excited. So I want to. So I've got three branches to it. So part of it is that I want people to be able to look after them, like I've been saying, look after their well-being day to day. And I think in terms of meditation and yoga, like meditation, if you can make friends with your mind and start learning how to kind of bring yourself into the present moment rather than worrying about the future or worrying about the past, then that has a huge impact. Yoga, in terms of moving your body into staying healthy, like that is an absolute massively important thing. Massage, you've got trauma. Like our bodies hold so much trauma, they remember everything. So when you can release tension from your body, you release a lot of emotional tension as well. They come hand in hand. So I've got all that part, and then obviously the coaching. So on a personal point of view, individuals can use whatever services they want. On a business point of view, then I'd love to kind of bring that into businesses. So it's just like something they offer to their staff. They offer massages, or they offer coaching, or they offer a meditation and yoga, things like this. It's part of their offering as well-being strategy. But also then I've got my retreats that I'm really excited about. So I want to run international retreats as well as local retreats in the UK, and I've got something bubbling around that which we're working on. But yeah, I just want to, I'd love to make it like a retreat around, like, so you've got personal growth side, so I'm building stuff around coaching, then you got the meditation, you got the yoga, you got yoga nidra, which I love. You've got all these different aspects that you can go to this retreat for a week or two or whatever, and just get renewed and help build these new habits into your life. So yeah, I've got my little, it makes sense in my head. I'm like making this whole thing. And also then when I have children, I've got my yoga that I can do mama and baby yoga and bring my little baby along. And then I got mama and baby massage that I can do, bring my little baby along. So it fits into my life, which is a huge important thing for me. I want it to fit my life rather than me be like work, home, like, you know, two separate things. I want them to complement each other.
And I think that's something that we would all aspire to, that it's about making your life work the best for you, and if you can support other people and develop other people at the same time, that is going to make for a much win for everybody. But I think coming out of this particular circumstance of 2020, there is going to be a huge demand for people needing greater support in ways that they haven't done in the past. I think retreats have always been seen as a luxury. I don't think they're going to be. I think we're going to have to make them mandatory because we are all going to be under a huge amount of stress and strain from being in this situation. It's a very unusual situation for humans to be in like this, and having that kind of mental space through yoga and meditation and mindfulness and learning those tools is only going to make for a much more cohesive and supportive community, I think. Even just starting small and building it up.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, that could be really cool.
Mm.
So interesting, thinking about trying not to think too much about the future, trying not to worry too much about what's happened in the past. So we're going to get a little bit personal. So I'm going to explain that Becca came back in a panic with lockdown, having newly presented a wedding ring, engagement ring. Yeah, there we go. But obviously you're going to be a 2021 bride. And planning for anything to do with the wedding, as I know, is quite traumatic in any case. But now planning is literally taken away from you every single week. So how are you coping with that?
Wow.
Oh, and what would you say to other brides who are also coping with this?
Oh, okay, don't do it. No, I'm joking. So I would say, I suppose I don't think I came back in a panic, but I did definitely came back overwhelmed, because, like, you know, I had this incredible, like, post to me on holiday. It was the most incredible thing, and then suddenly we went into lockdown on holiday and we had to try and get home, which was impossible, but we managed to make it home. And and everything's going on with the business at the same time, so much going on in my brain. And Paul, I'm really lucky that Paul is he's so proactive with these things. Like, he's not one of those men that, like, you sort the wedding, I'll just turn up. He is literally so super hands-on. So I'm actually really lucky in that way. And he was sorting out a lot of stuff, like his mum, his sister, and between his mum, his sister, and Paul, they found our venues. Like, they are my heroes. Like, honestly, I was just like, I can't think about this. I just can't, because I was so, like, consumed with trying to, like, work out my business and get myself kind of back up and running again. And so luckily they researched, always network, like you said. Honestly, they were incredible. So big shout out to Mama Kay and but yeah, so they were incredible. And I'm not, like you probably realize, I'm not the kind of bride that's like, this is my dream wedding, this is what I've always wanted. I don't have a vision in my head of what I want, which is good because then I don't have any like expectations, but also bad because then I'm like, yeah, do whatever. Like just whatever, just tell me when I need to be there and I'll turn up. It'll be fine.
Such a bloke.
No, it's terrible. So I actually need to get my, like, I'm such a planner, and I'm such a like a I'm so like methodical with my business. Like everything is thought out in detail. I love the detail and I love the big picture with my business. Like I like both parts. So I need to take that and apply it a little bit to my wedding, I think. But I would say what helped me the most, a couple of times when I was getting overwhelmed when we were trying to pick a venue, I had to separate it from my work, because obviously we're both working from home. It's very easy that, you know, we'd walk into each other's offices and say, oh, this about the wedding, blah, 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 or I found this, and I'd be in a flow and I'd be like, I can't think about that, I'm thinking about this. And so I had to be like, right, let's think about work during the week and the wedding on the weekend. Like have that cut off so it's not molding into each other, because you just can't switch from one to the other. It just doesn't work. So yeah, I did that, and that really helped. Booking the venue was, yeah, that was a massive thing. That's mostly sorted now, so they can just do their thing. And yeah, and pulling on everyone around me, like my sister is on it with the hen do. She's brilliant.
She sure is. Oh my God, you should send a WhatsApp group.
Oh, don't. I hate not being on it.
I'm like, whoa, I'm sitting back now. I'll just wait for you guys to fight over whatever's going on.
Yeah, but yeah, hopefully it's going well. But so Emma's sorting that, which is wonderful. We've got the venue booked. You know, Paul made a spreadsheet. We've got to love a spreadsheet, because that you just put on everything you have to do, and we've just gone through it and been like, right, we just need to sort it, just get methodical about it. And at the end of the day, we've said to each other, look, if COVID comes in, like I've checked with the venue that if COVID happens, we don't lose our deposit. Like they'll switch it to a new date if we need to. But if we can't have a wedding, a big one, then we'll just do it with a small group, and then have a really big party afterwards with everyone else when we can. Because at the end of the day, your weddings, you've got to be about bringing you two together and celebrating with you. You know, it's hard to cut anyone out, especially if Paul has a very big family.
And that's what I'm thinking of. And I would be in the same position. I would really struggle to decide who to invite. Like literally, that would be, apart from the venue and anything else, for me, that would be the biggest thing that would weigh on my mind. Because, yeah, like Paul, I've got a massive family, and I'd get murdered if I didn't invite them all. So I can imagine his family's the same. And so I would have to go the other way. I'd have to say no one's allowed to come.
Yeah. Well, I think just we haven't thought about it in super detail, but the thing I would think, right, okay, parents and siblings and grandparents, because he's got his two grandparents. I think you'd have to be really strict and be like immediate family, and because then you're not offending anyone. Like, because if you think cousins, if you go all cousins, all uncles, all aunties, all friends, then you are literally picking your friends. You're like, I care about you three the most, the rest of you not so much. So like you have to be I think you'd have to go to the immediate, and the people have to understand, wouldn't they? Like if you're only allowed 30, you're only allowed 30. Like you always end up like offending someone at a wedding, always. So at the end of the day, you've got to make it about yourself and enjoying the fact that you two are getting married. I think that's all you can do, really.
Yeah.
But hey, not worrying about the future, just taking it a bit.
What I was going to say as well, as you know, obviously how exciting it is to get engaged. Congratulations, by the way. There is an element also that life needs to go on as normal. Like for someone who's single like me, a lot of people are still like, so have you met anybody whilst in lockdown? And I'm like,
what do you think?
What do you mean? Have you met anybody in lockdown? Oh my God. And yet I've heard of people meeting in lockdown on, dating apps and stuff, and just meeting on Zoom, and you can sort of meet up now. And it is curious how, even though we've been locked up, people are still managing to meet other people and dating in a different way from what we have in the past. Definitely no hookups in the pub, but well, not unless they're in your table of six.
Social distance hug in the alley.
That's one thing I had a real laugh about with a friend, in that if we all went to the pub, and what if you fancied the bloke on the table next to you? How would you negotiate to swap tables?
Yeah. Tag team in and out.
It's like, oh my God, ridiculous. But in terms of weddings, obviously as a photographer of weddings, I love the fact that actually people have to be super selective. Because what that means is, for me, on the day, the people that you are smiling at, they are the people that you genuinely want there. And that actually hasn't happened. As you say, you often end up offending someone because they haven't been invited, or someone else has been invited over them. And yeah, there's always a little element of, I didn't really want them there on the day, or I don't know. I think the classic one is the new girlfriend or the new boyfriend.
Oh, yeah, I've got to give you a +1 now.
They don't get allowed unless they've been around a good long time.
Yeah,
and their surname.
Engaged, or you're not coming. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah. But I think that's what I've come to terms with. I'm gonna offend someone, and I think all I want from my wedding, and this is like, other than Paul to turn up, should be really good. I want to be barefoot on the grass when I'm doing my vows. That is literally all I want in life, and then the rest of it can just fit around it.
Well, fingers crossed they change the rules.
Yeah.
Come on, follow Scotland's lead.
Oh, pray, yeah.
Yeah, honestly. Okay. Let's go back to mental health for a bit.
Okay.
Global pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's locked up, dealing with different things. Most of us have got family, friends overseas, so every country is dealing with it differently. We only have to look at the US to see that it's been handled utterly differently from what it is here, and New Zealand or in Australia, or in Asian countries that have had something similar, or have had SARS before, or COVID-2 before, so they've actually dealt with a similar situation. And yet it's the first time globally we have all had to think about people's mental health from being locked up. So what would you like to see addressed, like, as a priority in mental health in this circumstance?
Okay.
Because we're all in the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
We're in this unique position that we could really tackle one thing that needs to be drastically changed.
I've got several.
She does.
One thing I'll always go with, which I've been like really passionate about for ages, is that mental health first aid needs to be a legal thing that people have to have within companies, because if you're over a certain amount of people in a company, you have to have a physical first aider. Yet it's not a legislative requirement that you have to have a mental health first aider, which I think is ridiculous, because you're more likely to come across someone who has suicidal ideation than coming across someone who's having a heart attack. Yet you have a physical first aider there just in case. And so people need to be informed, but then the business strategy, not only do people need to be trained as mental health first aiders, but they need to fit them into the strategy. Because so many people come to the courses where their businesses have sent them there, and they don't know how they're going to fit into the work life when they get back after the training. They don't know what their expectations are. They don't know what context they fit into. So the strategy needs to be developed within businesses, that they know what they want to do with the mental health first aiders, and they know where they want to get to. Just like a methodical strategy would be for, I don't know, bringing in an extra service. You'd be like, this is a service I want to offer. This is where I want to see it go. This is the income I want to see. They plan it all out. So plan out what you want to do with your wellbeing and mental health. Plan what you want to do with your mental health first aiders. How are they going to make an impact? Are they going to walk the floor? You know, how are you going to make sure that their faces are known? How are you going to communicate about mental health? Like, you need to get really strategic around it. But so that's the business side. And there is, if anyone wants to help lobby for mental health first aid to become a requirement, you can have a look at Where's Your Head At campaign. I'll put a link in the show notes. But really, really good. If you sign that, there's loads of stuff in the government trying to lobby for it. It's just Brexit and COVID have distracted them somewhat. And then the second part, I would say, is there needs to be more parity of esteem in terms of how we deal with mental health in the health system. So I think the NHS beds, there's not enough beds in psychiatric wards for people who need them. And people who are having a mental health crisis, more often than not, the people that have to respond to that are the police. And then the police, they have nowhere to put them in the hospital. I can't remember the actual figure, but there's like a couple of thousand beds within mental health wards in the UK. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, there's not enough beds for people, and instead the police often more often than not have to take them to a cell. Like, imagine you're having a mental health crisis and then you have to go and sit in a police cell. You're surrounded by drunk people maybe, or you're surrounded by and you're stuck in the cell. Like, when you're like, it's just not the way that they should be treated. So we need better support in the services. We need more connection between them, like the doctors talking to the GPs and blah blah blah, everyone communicating. And we need more support around the carers as well. So the carers for people who have mental health crisis, they end up suffering with their own mental health because they're having to take a lot of the brunt of their family members because the services aren't there to support them. Yeah. So it's a massive thing. But I think a good start would be improving the investment in mental health in terms of how it's split between mental health and physical health, and then getting mental health first aid integrated into the businesses.
So one of the things that still strikes me as incredibly poignant is the statistic that 1 in 4 of us will at some point have some sort of mental health issue. Mm-hmm. That means 1 in 4, and that's more than, you've got more chance of having that than having a heart attack, choking on your toast for breakfast. I mean, think about it. You've got more chance of that than doing something really ordinary. And yet we don't have enough support in the hospitals for someone to be properly supported, because that's what it is. It's the same as going in for a broken leg. And I personally just do not understand why it is not seen as exactly the same treatment. Okay, physical, mental, that's what it should be. And the less we don't deal with it, the bigger the problem is going to become. And that number is going to become 2 in 4, as opposed to 1 in 4. Mm. Interesting about the signing for the mental health first aid training. So that was Where's Your Head At? Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the really interesting things about that is I've done first aid training since I was at school. Mm-hmm. It never occurred to me that there was mental health first aid training. And you're quite right. You're very unlikely, in all the time that I worked in offices, I think I was the one that needed first aid attention, not anybody else. That's just ridiculous. That's what I mean. In 15 years of working in offices, did I ever come across a first aid situation that I had to deal with? No. And yet I could tell you the 4 people on one floor who had a mental health crisis. Yeah. In one company in 1 year.
Yeah.
So the numbers just don't stack up at all.
The interesting thing as well is that a lot of people who suffer from mental ill health, actually it shows itself in a physical way a lot of the time as well. So you get a lot of back pain, or you, like heart disease is really, really common physical health factor that comes with mental health sometimes, when it's like severe depression and things like that. And that's a lot of research is going into that connection. But if you look at it, if you look after the mental health, then you're also going to improve the physical health. Like they come together and it gets into a wonderful feedback loop. So I think gone are the days where we used to see them as separate entities. Like everyone's a whole person, everyone comes as a whole. If you're stressed, what happens? Like if you're stressed, your heart gets palpy, maybe you get a twitch in your eye, you can't sleep properly. If you're depressed, you maybe sleep too much, you can't eat, or you're eating too much. Like everything, that the way mental health manifests is physical, and it's going to affect your physical health as well. So it makes more economical sense as well to invest in mental health.
It certainly does. But it's convincing people and coming up with the arguments for businesses to invest in that, or getting government to pay for it.
Well, the argument I would say for investing in mental health is, if you actually look at the amount of days that are lost due to mental health, it is astronomical amount of days that are lost. And that's not even all the people that are actually off because of their mental health. A lot of people report it as, I'm feeling unwell, or my back's ache, or they get time off their back, or they're I've been sick last night. They don't actually say I'm having an anxiety attack, because they get ashamed too. And so the actual figures, which God, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like 70 billion a year lost because of mental health days. And so that is the answer to businesses. Like there's so much money lost because you have to pay for people to be off for long periods of time, or sick days, or lost productivity when they're in the office. That is your motivation, your financial motivation.
It's also not just big organizations or businesses. I think the other side of this is a lot of people, particularly if their jobs are going to be made redundant in the next 2 or 3 months, there are going to be a lot of people out of work, looking for work, starting their own businesses. And those people are also going to get lost because they're not supported by a business, or they're not supported by their GP, or whatever it is. And that is a whole other section. You and I both know full well having your own business comes with a huge amount of stress that you didn't really factor on when you started it. And when you're out of the comfort and security blanket of being in a big organization, you then suddenly are responsible for that yourself. I totally agree that I think businesses should be investing in mental health first aid training, but I also think it needs to come from individuals themselves within those organizations saying, look, this is a priority. It's affecting teamwork, it's affecting our managers, it's affecting our productivity. And until it gets addressed from that level as well, there isn't going to be that cohesion and dealing with it. Yeah.
Spot on.
We've talked for quite a long time.
Yes, we have.
But is there anything else that you would maybe like to touch base on, bring up, something we haven't talked about?
I think we've covered a lot, haven't we? One thing, we were talking about mental health, we were talking about mindfulness and meditation. We were saying about how many people don't embrace it. The one thing I would add to that is that if you don't necessarily want to meditate, you can still just take a couple of breaths every day. Just even if it's just standing out on the grass, like every morning I take my shoes off, I stand on the grass, I ground myself, and I just take a couple of breaths. Even if you can't fit in loads of meditation into your day, you don't need to sit and meditate for an hour. Just take some time for yourself.
So I'm wondering if this is the final question that you ask everybody, which is about what is your one takeaway from today. So I wonder if that's what you would like to say, or would you like to maybe expand on what your goal is, and that is to inspire people to take charge of their own well-being.
Yeah, I always think the one most important thing for me, like I've had some really amazing variety of answers from people I've interviewed. I always think it's quite a big one, but work on your mindset and attitude. That should be your priority, because your mindset and the way you see the world determines how you experience the world. So if you're a kind of person that sees the cup half empty, or if you're the kind of person that always feels like, you know, things are not going your way, you're catastrophizing a lot, things like that, if you can change that, if you can work on bringing more gratitude into your day, if you can work on seeing things in a different way, then you can alter your reality. So in terms of like, it's something I worked on myself, which is why I think it's the most important thing. I changed the way I looked at things. Like that quote, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Like that is huge. Like it changes your reality, like doing things like journaling or like reflecting to kind of work out what you think about things. And, you know, it's a really good way to kind of like digest your brain. Doing things like positive affirmations, like on their own, they're not going to be like a changing thing, but it starts changing your mind to kind of think more positively around things, seeing opportunities. Like things like, I don't know, spending time with positive people, spending time with people who see a challenge and don't, you know, back out of it, or people who want to get more from their life. Like there's so many little things you can do to try and alter the way you perceive life. And I think that would be my one takeaway, is reflect on that. Because like, you know, so John Kabat-Zinn, his Chunky book, he talks about this study where they looked at this, basically the genetics bits inside of you. So inside your DNA, you have these little shoelace ends to it, and they're called telomeres. So imagine, like, you know, the little plastic thing at the end of a shoelace, and it keeps it from fraying. They're on the end of your DNA. And as you age, they get shorter. So imagine your shoelace gets shorter, it starts to fray. And as they get shorter, things like, you know, disease and aging start happening to you. But stress can make them shorten quicker. So the more you stress, the quicker you age. But they found that it's not necessarily the stress that causes that effect. It is the way we perceive the stress. Which is why two people can come out of trauma and stress situations completely different, because it is their perception of the stress. That's why two people see it. One person will see it as an opportunity, one person will see it as a threat. So work on yourself, work on your mindset, understand what you think about things, understand how you think that could benefit you if you changed the way you thought about things. There's so much you could do on it. So that would be my challenge.
I like that a lot. I think changing perceptions is something that we can all be inspired by. And your words are, you know, quite inspirational in that you can have one perception, but it's like putting on a different pair of glasses or putting on sunglasses. If you can see things differently, even momentarily, it changes what you do see.
And when your reality changes, because you look at it differently, it changes how you behave. And then so you create new reality. And it's not about putting on rose tinted glasses and just pretending everything is okay. It is just looking at something and trying to take the best from it, just for your own mental health. Like if you're always looking at something and feeling that that's awful, that's stressful, that's horrendous, and the world's never working for me, then you will only repeat that behavior and repeat that kind of effect.
Awesome. Alrighty. Is there anything else you'd like to finish on?
Oh, I really enjoyed this, Mel. Thank you.
It's
It's very weird being on the other side of it.
This a bit. It's quite nice not to have to think so much.
Oh my god! Oh god! I'm gonna be a lot nicer to my interviewees now. I've experienced the other side.
Yeah, there is something in that, and I'm more than happy to be your interviewer next time as well when you kick it off next year. What I would say is that I think what you are doing is absolutely wonderful for mental health in the UK and globally, and I can only hope that more people will hear the messages that you have to convey, and that we can implement mental first aid training into businesses as a legal requirement. And I also hope that it is just seen as a normal thing that we deal with day to day, and we deal with it in a way that is supportive and resourceful and helpful for us going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Oh, this is the end. This is my end of my series 1 of my podcast.
Yay!
Done 10 interviews and 15 podcasts altogether, and now I'm going to take a break for a few months. Season 2 is going to be out in January, and over the next few months I am just going to create some material on my YouTube. So it's going to be all material around mental health and yoga and mindfulness. So do check it out. Do subscribe to my YouTube. So much to come. And thank you ever so much for everyone who's listened to these interviews and joined me on this journey, because I have really enjoyed them so much. Loved it. Thank you so much, Mel. You can go and relax now. Oh, we have to do the Maui habit.
Okay.
I always make everyone else do it. So sit back, roll your shoulders back and down, place your feet firmly on the ground, and say, today is going to be a great day.
Today is going to be a great day.
Wonderful. See, little affirmations like that. Every morning I wake up, put my feet on the ground out of bed, and I say it to myself. And that just alters how you experience the day. It really does.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I like it.